such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Maybe you could just kick off with a brief introduction to this incredible film for people who don't know anything about Breaking. What can they expect when they watch it?
Sure. Uh, Breaking is the story of one man's sincere-hearted rebellion against a broken system. It's also John Boyega, Michael K. Williams' powerhouse performances.
And maybe you could just sort of take us on a brief journey, going back and seeing how you came to make this film as your feature debut, how you first came across Aaron's article and heard of Brian's story, but also the ways in which it sort of chimed with some of your own personal history in terms of your father's experience as a veteran.
Sure. I first read the story Brian Brown Easley in the article that you mentioned, Aaron Gell's, and it pierced me through my soul. There was just such longing in there for purity, for a better world, for a place that honored human dignity. And I recognized the righteous rage that Brian had in my father. My dad's a pretty quiet guy, but he experienced a lot of heartbreak with the Veterans Affairs Administration. He has Agent Orange from his time in the Navy, and like so many people, was caught in a system feeling like he was a cog in the machine, right? With no ability to really move the machine for years and years. And he went from being an athlete really to being in a wheelchair. And over the course of my lifetime, I've seen so many veterans, so many people that are in those shoes. And Brian's story, for me, it made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me want to look at people better, to do right by people. And if it helped me understand my dad better, I felt like it would help a lot of other people do the same.
Mm. And of course, there's always, a lot of opportunity, but also challenges posed by telling a real life story on screen. So where did you begin with Brian's story, and how did you perhaps balance those aspects of wanting to stay true to the facts, doing the research, meeting his family, but then of course you've also got to have one eye on, making it work as a narrative film, and elements are going to need to be fictionalized and characters fleshed out. So how did you bring those two things into balance?
Kwame and I at one point had a 250-page draft that I don't think anybody wants to watch, because it has all the nitty-gritty details in there that for us were the, things that made us want to make this film, right? The microaggressions, the laughter, the things that when Brian turns aside, your heart awakens. We had to talk to Brian's family and really figure out, like, what is the truth of this? And there was an opening that really just made it clear with Brian's wife what this was for us. She approached him through such a lens of love. She loved this man dearly, and we wanted to make sure that we told Brian's story through a lens of love, because this is a man who has a living daughter, a living wife, and there's so many living veterans. And we wanted to make sure that if we portrayed it through that lens, we could narrow it down that way. We could get to the hottest point of the fire that help us understood. And then it gets a little easier to cut, because you understand, okay, well, this isn't the hottest point of the fire. That's like, 10 degrees off.
And in terms of the look and feel of the film, I guess it's sort of bouncing off, some of the things you're just mentioning there. You could sort of have gone more full throttle kind of action thriller, and then sort of the heist element of the story. But even though it sort of has the trappings of that, it much more leans into kind of the character study, and seeing the relationships and what plays out between him and these other characters. And then there's this contrast made between the sort of inside of the bank, perhaps the kind of claustrophobia, almost like it could be a theatre play, and then the outside world, where everything's, it's all bells and whistles and everything's going on. So could you just talk us through some of your choices you made there, and also maybe some of the other films you were influenced by?
Sure. For us, it was very much a chamber piece. It starts with Brian just playing alone, and then there becomes 3, 4 instruments, and then the orchestra starts to come in, right? The rest of it, and then it builds and builds and builds into this frenetic space. When we listen to what happened that day, that's how it played out. And of course, there's little things that you do to amplify that to make it feel even truer than the truth. But for us, we really followed the shape of what happened. Yeah.
And in terms of perhaps some other films or filmmakers that you might have drawn from in the making of this.
Of course, Inside Man, pretty incredible film. We of course looked to Dog Day, knowing that that was a film that is iconic in this genre, that really was before its time.
And of course, one of the central things of this film, which just sort of makes it so incredible, is this performance from John Boyega. And I don't know whether he would, in some ways, seem the most natural choice. Of course, he's British; he's very much an American character, but he's just so captures the sort of nuance that where he's treading this line constantly between this what seems to be a very caring, gentle, compassionate nature. But then, of course, because of what he's been through, he's also very volatile, very unpredictable, sort of simmering with, this righteous rage about the injustice he's been dealt. And that's not an easy character to play, but he just seems to do it so well. So did you always know that he was your man?
Well, I want you to go and tell everybody about the film, because that was one of the most perfect explanations that I've heard of what we did. So thank you. Yes, John was just the right guy for the role. Initially, I partnered with Jonathan Majors. Then Marvel scheduling and COVID and all of these other date pushes had thought of John at very start, but there'd been scheduling issues, and thankfully, the right person to be in the room winds up in the room. And John just has such command of his craft, such empathy, that I mean, the performance speaks for itself.
Mm.
Yeah.
And even, all the supporting cast as well, the two actresses who the bank manager and the other woman who's in the bank, inside the bank with him, Connie Britton, reporter on the phone. And of course, very sadly, but, it must have been an amazing opportunity to be able to work with Michael K. Williams on his last project. So we can also talk through that. The supporting cast too.
Such a joy. Really, having the supporting cast that we did made it, everybody's ratcheting up, right? So each performance is like, oh, well, you're doing this, well, I better bring this. Oh, you're doing this, I better bring this. So each day was really just one-upping each other as actors, because of course you're about the art of it and you want to tell the powerful story that we have, but it's also the craft. And you're seeing, okay, Salinas is seeing John do this, Nikki seeing John do this, John seeing Nikki do this, Salinas do this. Like it's this beautiful collaboration when it starts to happen, where everybody's coming in with their homework done, being there for each other off camera. Mike, he is so beautiful as a human. That our elder statesman turning up in his dashiki and his like beautiful scented self, just welcoming the extras to the scene, giving them career advice. It sets for such a good tone on set, such a good working environment in the midst of something that, COVID is extremely hard to shoot in. But really working with people that not only are portraying characters that are seeking to be empathetic and on screen are so different from who our actors are as human, but also our actors, particularly Mike, have that thread of empathy that just permeated, and generosity that permeated into every day on set.
And the other thing that I was reading about is, kind of were taking a slightly unusual approach to the way you were filming it. And it was almost like we were saying, kind of more like a theatre set. And even John said he was sort of watching back the film, thinking, "Oh, I don't even remember doing that." And he was sort of capturing elements of his performance. So, what was it like being on this set, and what might have been some of the highlights, but also the challenging moments?
Your job as a director is to facilitate that, right? Like you're supposed to enable your team to do their best work. You want to create opportunities for those magic moments to occur. So for me, that means getting all the crew off set as much as they can. So Nikki and John are just interacting with each other. And when Nikki's off camera and John's on camera, she's right here so that he can actually speak with her and not a glass lens. And that makes all the difference because you're then able to capture the rawness. I mean, they're spitting at each other. And then there's these moments where I remember when John was just right off camera for Kaya, and she's on the phone with him, that final phone call, that final scene. He's off camera in the bathtub, and we just had this moment, this long moment of silence between the two of them where I didn't call cut. And she's a kid, so it's best to let kids just be kids. So she's just living into it. And then I'm able to lean over with John to say, breathe. And then John takes the step further and he's like, and he's exhaling and you hear him kind of hyperventilating. He's acting full throttle off camera. And Kaya's just playing off of him. To have actors that go that far for each other, still taking care of their bodies and themselves, which, you have to do in such a physically demanding role. What a gift to the audience. What a gift to me as a director.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of some of the themes that kind of, that come out of the film and the takeaways, I mean, this is quite a lot of layers to it in some senses, because you could look at this very specifically about how badly veterans are treated, and this kind of weird contradiction in, sort of being very patriotic about people in the military, but then once they have served their country, they're sort of forgotten about and not supported. But then you can also there are more universal elements to it as well. We know that the gap between rich and poor is only widening, and it sometimes does feel impossible to be heard. So there's lots of people that can connect to it in that way. So what do you think the themes are for you?
Well, again, I love hearing you say all that because you're capturing the complexity of what we hope to acknowledge. We didn't want a simple solution. It's a simple desire to be heard, but there's not a simple solution. And yet there is. Do right by people where you are. That's the next step, because we can't address every single policy. There's so many that are not working for the systems that they're in. We can't fix every system at the moment. It's so complex and so broken, but we can start. If each person who watches this film starts where they are with their voice and their power that they have and just lives out of what's best for the other person, like seeing people, that is where change grows and blossoms and really branches out. It's an incremental thing.
Mm. And it does feel like we are in a world now that just seems to be becoming increasingly more sort of black and white and polarized. It's strange because you should feel like with the technology we have, we should be able to communicate even better, but it seems to be making it even harder. And so you are losing that nuance. And it does feel like cinema can occupy this space where you can tell more complex stories and make more complex points. And hopefully by humanizing these stories, people can kind of get behind, the clickbait and the headlines, that really can just be more divisive. So do you feel like that's true?
100%. I think that's the power of cinema, the power of storytelling that we've seen for generations. If you go back to the dawn of time, how does so much of the world change? It's on the power of storytelling, power of one person deciding this is not a story they're going to accept.
And obviously you've already been on such an amazing journey with this film, back from Sundance, but the jury award, and that was like a year ago now. So how has it felt to you to see it connect with audiences in the way it has. I mean, that must be the sort of the most vindicating thing ever. For something you've invested so much time in a project to see how audiences react to it.
It's been pretty incredible. We get messages from, I say we, me, John, Kwame, the producers, um, the other actors, we all get messages from folks many times a week saying, thank you. This is my story. It hasn't been told, or I understand my brother, my sister, my dad, my mom, because of this story. We had a lady from the VA reach out to Jessica, Brian's wife, and say, I want to help. That's the power of story.
And can you quickly tell us what you might be working on next, or are you not sure yet? Has got anything in the works?
I do. I'm writing, but we'll announce it soon.
All right. Thanks so much. It was so lovely to chat to you. Can't wait for everyone else to have the chance to see Breaking. Thank you.
Likewise.